History does not always turn slowly. Sometimes it snaps. On a single battlefield, in a single moment, everything can change. The balance of power, the fate of empires, the direction of human history. Generations of strategy, tradition, and belief can collapse under the weight of one decisive clash. Soldiers march into battle expecting another fight like the last one, but occasionally they face something new, a weapon never seen before, a tactic never anticipated, a force that makes old ways of war suddenly useless. This is the story of such a moment, a battle where courage alone was no longer enough, where numbers failed, where centuries of warfare were rendered obsolete in a single day. This is not just the story of a battle. It is the story of how war itself changed forever, and how the world that followed was shaped by fire, steel, and innovation. Before the battle, war followed familiar rules. Armies marched in ordered formations. Commanders relied on doctrines passed down through generations, and victory depended on discipline, courage, and numbers. Weapons evolved slowly. Spears gave way to swords, swords to early firearms, but the rhythm of battle remained largely unchanged. Lines advanced, cavalry charged, infantry held ground. Commanders believed they understood war because it behaved the same way it always had. Empires rose and fell within this system. Kings and generals trusted tradition more than innovation. New ideas were often dismissed as unreliable, untested, or dishonorable. The battlefield rewarded predictability. But beneath the surface, change was brewing. Industrial progress, political desperation, and technological ambition began pushing warfare in a new direction. Engineers and tacticians experimented quietly, often ignored by conservative leadership. What they were building did not merely improve old weapons, it threatened to erase them. Most armies failed to recognize the danger. They prepared for yesterday's war, confident that courage and experience would carry the day. They were wrong. As forces assembled for what many believed would be a conventional battle, few realized they were standing at the edge of a historical fault line. When the fighting began, it would not just decide who won or lost, it would decide how wars would be fought from that moment forward. The battle began as expected. Troops advanced in formation. Orders were shouted. Drums beat. Banners flew. Commanders watched confidently, believing their strategies were sound. Then, the battlefield changed. A new weapon entered the fight, faster, deadlier, and more devastating than anything soldiers had faced before. Traditional formations became liabilities. Tight ranks turned into targets. Courage could not outrun technology. Within minutes, confusion spread. Units that had trained for years found themselves powerless. Commands no longer mattered when the ground itself seemed to betray them. What once required skill and bravery could now be accomplished with speed and precision. The psychological shock was immediate. Soldiers realized they were fighting an enemy they did not understand, using weapons their training had never prepared them for. Panic replaced discipline. Order collapsed into chaos. Commanders struggled to adapt. Some tried to force old tactics onto a new reality. Others froze, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. Decisions made in seconds sealed the fate of entire divisions. By the end of the battle, victory was no longer about manpower or tradition. It belonged to whoever controlled innovation. When the smoke cleared, one truth was undeniable. The old way of war was dead. The true power of the weapon was not just its lethality, it was what it made impossible. It destroyed the dominance of massed formations, it rendered traditional defenses ineffective, it forced armies to spread out, dig in, and rethink everything from movement to command. What once took hours now took moments. What once required bravery now required adaptation. The battlefield became faster, more unpredictable, and far more lethal. This single innovation shifted war from physical endurance to technological superiority. Training alone could no longer compensate for inferior equipment. Strategy now depended on production, logistics, and innovation as much as leadership. Nations that understood this adapted quickly. They reorganized armies, redesigned doctrines, and invested heavily in research. Those that resisted paid a terrible price in future conflicts. The psychological impact lingered long after the battle ended. Soldiers entered future wars knowing that survival depended less on heroism and more on preparation and flexibility. This single innovation became the foundation for modern warfare. Every weapon that followed, more powerful, more precise, built upon the same principle revealed that day. Wars would no longer be decided by tradition. They would be decided by change. News of the battle spread rapidly. Military academies rewrote their textbooks. Generals debated late into the night. Governments rushed to understand what had happened and how to replicate it. Some nations embraced the lesson. They modernized their forces, invested in industry, and reshaped their strategies. Others clung to the past, convinced the battle was an exception, not a warning. The result was imbalance. Future wars exposed this divide mercilessly. Armies that adapted survived. Those that did not were overwhelmed, often before they understood why. This shift extended beyond the battlefield. Economies reorganized around war production. Politics became inseparable from military technology. The cost of war increased, not just in lives, but in resources, planning, and consequence. The battle had done more than change tactics. It had reshaped global power. From this point forward, warfare would never again be simple. Victory required foresight, innovation, and the willingness to abandon comfort and tradition. The age of modern war had begun. Long after the battlefield fell silent, its impact continued to echo through history. Every modern conflict carries its legacy: the emphasis on technology, the fear of obsolescence, the understanding that the next war may not resemble the last. This battle taught the world a brutal lesson: stagnation is fatal. In war, adaptation is survival. Weapons would continue to evolve, faster, smarter, deadlier, but the principle remained the same. The side that learns first, adapts fastest, and prepares hardest shapes the future. The soldiers who fought that day could not have known they were standing at the turning point of history, but their experience became a warning passed down through generations. War is not just fought with courage, it is fought with ideas. And sometimes, a single battle is enough to change everything. History often remembers victories and defeats, but the most important moments are the ones that redefine the rules entirely. This battle was not just about who won, it was about how war itself transformed, how innovation replaced tradition, and how the future arrived faster than anyone expected. Understanding these moments matters
not to glorify war, but to understand its cost, its consequences, and its relentless demand for change. Because the next great shift in warfare may already be taking shape, just as unseen, just as underestimated. And when it arrives, it will once again decide not only who fights, but who survives.